Welcome to Presentation Ponder Practice. Hebrews chapter 3 verse 1 says, "Therefore, holy brethren, partakers of a heavenly calling, consider Jesus, the apostle and high priest of our confession." In the first video on Hebrews chapter 3, it was stated that we would begin each video with the recitation of the first verse. Part of the reason for this is because it establishes the direction of the themes presented in the chapter. Here's what that means. Christians should consider Jesus. Verse 1, because he is the apostle and high priest of our confession. Verse 2, because Jesus is an example of faithfulness. Verse 3, he has been counted worthy of more glory than Moses. Verses 4 and 6, he is God's son who is over God's house. Jesus is to be considered for several other reasons, some of which will be looked at in the next two episodes. But for now, let's examine more closely the writing of verse 1. It is the conclusion of the contrast and the earlier comparison of Moses to Jesus, or Jesus to Moses at times. Hebrews chapter 3 verse 1. Therefore, holy brethren. Holy describes God himself, or any person or thing which belongs to God. Brethren refers to fellow believers or Christians. Partakers of a heavenly calling refers to fellow believers sharing the heavenly calling, meaning that each person who accepts and responds correctly to that heavenly calling. But what is a heavenly calling? Well, a heavenly calling can be either a call from God, connected with what's said in verses 7 through 10 of this chapter, chapter 3, and what's stated in chapter 5, verse 4. Or a heavenly calling can be a call to heaven, a theme which is taken up in chapter 4 and again in chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Both are good options, and neither really stands out above the other. But consider draws our attention to give careful thought or consideration to how Jesus was the apostle and high priest of our confession, or as some have it, our faith. The term apostle simply means someone who is sent. Jesus was sent by God. He was a messenger, an ambassador, if you will, who spoke God's words. As he was an apostle, he was also high priest. As high priest, Jesus faithfully honored God, serving the people as he presented their sacrifice offering to God. When he gave himself as the sacrifice offering, he made propitiation for our sins, well, for the sins of the people, thus turning away God's wrath from the sins of those who come to him in obedient faith. Jesus is the apostle and high priest of our confession. The term confession here means an agreement, an acknowledgement, the profession or open declaration of our belief. Jesus is the apostle and high priest of Christianity. Well, there are several things to ponder, but here are a few things we should put into practice based on the teaching of Hebrews 3 verse 1. First of all, we need to consider our relationship or fellowship with believers. Holy brethren, that means that there are those who are holy. They are the brethren, and because there are many of them, we must consider our fellowship with them. Are we in God's house? Are we a part of God's family? Are we in the brotherhood of believers? And if so, what fellowship do we have? Is it a strong fellowship? Is it a weak fellowship? Or is it a fellowship that is in question? We also need to consider our relationship with God. Based upon Jesus' relationship with God, he became or was appointed to be a high priest and also an apostle, an ambassador for God. Could we, in our relationship with God, stand out as one who is imitating God? One who is living according to his will so that we could be an ambassador for the faith, an ambassador for God? And if we could do those things, then can we also at the same time share the message and draw others closer to God? Or would our message push some away? We also need to consider Jesus' example of faithfulness and his position. Jesus was faithful, and that's what allowed him to be such a high priest for us. It is his position as high priest which he fulfilled, fulfilling God's will first, and then by extension also doing that which was needed for us. And in his faithfulness toward us, we can put our trust and confidence in him. Can the same be said of us? That we are living lives faithful to God first and foremost, and lives that thereby show an example before others that we can be trusted to speak the truth, to stand firm on the truth. I hope that in these discussions that you find something to ponder further, and that as you ponder those things in your mind, you will find something to put into practice. May the God of heaven bless you.